stuff.
That's right, and we're prepared to defend it. The U.S. Supreme Court just ruled 2 years ago in Indiana that photo ID's requirement was constitutional. So we believe we have the legal authority, and we believe we have the legal precedent, and the constitutional authority in the U.S. Supreme Court, and it's all going to come down to whether we can withstand a legal challenge. And that brings us to one of the reasons, Tim and Mark, is why we chose St. Paul and Duluth. We didn't want to start in a smaller city like Inver Grove Heights or another smaller city. We wanted something major, so that when this gets to the courts, there's going to be a lot of press behind it.
Right.
Okay? It's a big difference when you get a capital city and you walk in with 10,000 signatures. Because this could be a 4-3 decision, and it's going to have long-lasting ramifications.
You think this might go to the U.S. court?
No. It'll go to the Minnesota Supreme Court.
Okay.
I would almost bet, and it'll be on a very rapid, it'll go to the Minnesota Supreme Court probably within 6 weeks from the time we
So you
turn it
think it'll
in.
be on a fast track?
It has to be, because it's scheduled to go on the ballot November 2nd. It's going to go right to the Minnesota.
true.
It's going to go right to the Minnesota Supreme Court. In fact, that's exactly what happened with term limits.
Yeah.
I talked to Pat Anderson a couple nights ago. Pat Anderson running for
I know Pat.
auditor.
We both do.
Yeah. And she was the executive director of a group in Minneapolis in 1995 called the Minneapolis Term Limits Coalition. Were you aware of any of that?
No, I wasn't.
It's similar to what we're doing here, okay? They went out and got 20,000 signatures for term limits for city council and mayor, to limit them to 2 4-year terms.
Okay.
And they turned in the signatures, and the city clerk said, we believe this is unconstitutional, get out of here. And they went and hired an attorney, Chris Dietzig, to represent them, and it went all the way to the Minnesota Supreme Court on a fast track. And they ruled against her 4-3. And the whole opinion was based on one word, the word qualification. 4 justices says term limits is a qualification, and therefore term limits can't go on the ballot because it violates the Minnesota Constitution. The other 3 justices said you're nuts. But it was a 4-3 decision. It's going to make term limits impossible, nearly impossible to go back after on a city level. But that's similar to what we're doing. Do you see the reasoning? Right. We wanted to get a big city so we can get the public relations going and get the yard signs out and get promoting this. Vote yes for photo ID, and let the chips fall where they may. So, we think it makes sense. We spent about 3 months working on the ballot wording because we know we're going to be challenged, and we talked to the Secretary of State's office in Indiana, Todd Rokita. He's the Secretary of State. Mary Kiffmeyer knows all these folks.
Yeah, she would help you out.
And she's the one who lined us up saying, you got to talk to these people in Indiana because they had the experience.
Right.
They just went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. So we consulted them. We had long conference calls with them to make sure that our wording was as tight as it could be. And one of the things that we had to add in our referendum was regarding if people couldn't afford a photo ID. Then we have a provision in there that says if a citizen cannot afford one, the city shall provide the means for them to get a state ID at no cost. And we had to add that in there.
You get around the alienation of voter argument that some people couldn't get a
right. And you're right. And the added cost to the city's probably not going to be that much. Mary Kiffmeyer said it would be pretty minimal because most people have a photo ID.
Yeah, and they're already set up to put out IDs anyway, so they're not going to have to build a whole new infrastructure.
Right. So they're going to come after us, and we've always thought that the people who are against photo ID, if you think about it, you really have to question their motives. How can...
You don't have to think very hard. That's easy to question their motives. It's obvious.
Yeah, you question your motives, but the other thing is do they have a little bit of a case? Are some voters perhaps going to be alienated, not able to vote because they don't have a photo ID? Let's just take one scenario, and now I'm all for photo IDs. Don't get me wrong, but okay, quick scenario of someone just moves into an area, say from out of state. They're here long enough to be a resident, but they filed for their driver's license. They don't have the photo ID yet, and they go register to vote, be it even same-day registration. They're going through the line, everything else. They're all ready to vote, except they don't have the photo ID. yet in all other forms, they are actually qualified to legally vote. That would be alienating voters in a sense.
Yeah, and I think, and we,
And it'd be very few scenarios that, I mean, you hit something like that.
right,
but
that's
it-
something
it-
that,
an
that,
argument
that, that's
could be
gonna,
made.
that's gonna have to be worked out. I mean, we don't support same-day registration anyway. I mean,
No,
that just
I-
breeds, that just breeds corruption.
trouble.
I
yeah.
can
So-
tell you a few stories about that too.
Right,
You know,
but you're absolutely right. It's something that we're gonna have to deal with.
you know,
I
same-day
mean-
registration tables where you can't hear a word of English being spoken.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You have to start questioning, you know,
Yeah.
the legality of some of the people registering.
Right, and maybe they're gonna have to make, the photo ID, to be able to produce a photo ID, in various, you know, maybe even be at some of the election polls to make it for them. I mean,
Or perhaps even a city-issued temporary ID. You go to City Hall, make proof, you show proof that you're a resident, and the city can just make a quick temporary photo ID for purposes such as, you know,
right.
voting,
I mean, yeah,
voting
you know,
or
I hadn't thought of that,
identification.
but yeah, see, Ramsey, the city of St. Paul contracts with Ramsey County.
Yeah.
So the county handles all their elections. But yeah, I mean, they're the ones who came up with this same-day registration. I mean,
Right.
it has its problems. I mean, we don't have provisional ballots in Minnesota,
No,
so
we sure don't.
there's a lot of problems with same-day registration. I mean, that's a whole nother, I mean, there's problems with absentee ballots, as you know, with Mark Ritchie. We have an incompetent Secretary of State who absolutely doesn't care about training election judges. I mean, the guy is as devious as anybody I've ever met. You know, I don't know if you saw that KSTP report.
No.
Well, when he was on, when they did a study on absentee ballots, and they brought all this stuff to his office, and he goes, "Well, you should have told me to bring my glasses before you spring something like this on me." I mean, this is the arrogance from these people. I mean,
Well, yeah, the same thing is you know, with the organization that's voter fraud, Acorn.
Right.
Sorry. You know, where they went to Mark Ritchie and said, well, hey, you know, Acorn's brought in all these ballots, you know, have you checked any of them? Kind of, well, you know, we have absolutely no reason to think that there's anything
Yeah,
wrong
there's
with
no
them.
reason.
You,
Yeah.
you know, yet they're being, you know, Acorn's being prosecuted in how many other states for voter fraud?
right. And, you know, and on that same note, in the U.S.
You know,
Supreme Court,
and not to mention the fact that Mark Ritchie is one of the people in state government who's got a very tight, active history with Acorn in the past. So, I mean,
right, he sits on their board. But the
Right.
U.S. Supreme Court, and this is important, says, how can a system instill public confidence? How can an election system instill public confidence if no safeguards exist
I
to
think our
detect or
message
deter
has got to
voter
be,
fraud?
guys, that you got to elect a Republican legislature if you want to get these kinds of problems solved. The Democrats are not going to do it. They have too much to lose.
well, we had a
They don't
Republican
care what's right or
legislature, and
wrong.
They didn't get it through.
Well,
Yeah.
they don't care what's
Well,
right
Mary
or wrong.
Kiffmeyer did a tremendous job.
Yeah.
And,
She
and she
tried.
told
She
me the
definitely
first thing Mark Ritchie did when he took office, and she told me this over the phone, is undo all the training and almost everything that she did over 8 years. Mark Ritchie flipped it upside down and says, threw it in the trash can. I mean, that's the kind of people we're dealing with
That's
here.
right. That's the kind of people we're dealing with. That's not the DFL party that I remember when I was growing up. They were liberal, but they weren't sleazy like this.
No.
This is a relatively recent development, and it's really unpleasant.
This is Illinois politics.
It is. It really
It
is.
is indeed, yes.
But
sir.
you know, I mean, we're not directly affiliated with the Republican Party, although I am a Republican. But the Republican Party doesn't sponsor us or anything. We're a 501c4 organization.